you can control just kind of from the bottom node here of each of these fingers. So, I'm picking a pattern that's, these three are kind of grouped together slightly, and the index finger is slightly on its own. So it's not a regular pattern, regular meaning evenly spaced. Okay, and then our thumb. Our thumb is tricky. Thumbs are always tricky. So anyway, that's the first part. Now I'm going to actually go in there and grab those other sections of the joints and kind of give them a bend. Now let's see. It's always good to explore your own hand when it's at rest and what it does. And if I'm looking at this just at rest here, feels very flimsy. But what I'm noticing is there's a definite bend in that first digit. It's not parallel with the base of the hand, so you want to grab those first digits. And you want to give them a little bit of a bend inward, and then basically come up with a interesting sort of design for the rest of it. And when I say interesting design, I mean, see how these fingers seem to form like just a nice little arc there? It begins to add a little bit of interest because it's not 100% in line with each other. See, you can start to spin it around, and from different angles you get sort of this idea of a big shape in front of a smaller shape and a smaller shape and a smaller shape. So it kind of draws your eye back in space a little bit, which is nice. And then you can grab all those controls and give them, if you use them at the same time, it'll give a little bit of bend to everything at the same time, which would be kind of nice. Just a little extra bend on that finger. Now, I will say this. You can tell, we're taking a long time just to do this first pose. This happens a lot, okay? When you're just starting out on a shot, the first pose is always the hardest one, at least in my mind. It takes you the longest to get to it because you're building a pose out of nothing. You have no reference at all. It's just there on the blank sheet of paper. So, it takes a while to get something that actually looks good. But then once you have that first pose, you'll actually find that the rest of the stuff goes more quickly because you have something that you're basing all your other poses off of. Now, something else that I'm doing here, I'm actually twisting these fingers slightly inward. And the reason is because if you look at your own hand, as you close your hand, it's not just perfectly side to side. There's a slight curl to things. Okay, everything is radiating out from this central point on your hand. And that's because of the way the bones are actually set up in your hand. And it allows you to get a grip, is basically why they do it. You can also see it if you try and touch your fingers to your thumb. You can see all those, they sort of have an almost radial motion, the way that they pull in towards the thumb. So when you are making a pose, if you want to make it feel more organic, add in some of that twist, slight inward movement. And you don't just have to do it on the bottom joint, because you'll find actually that your fingers are very, very flexible. If you look at mine, you actually notice that they're not perfectly straight up and down. This one actually has a bend, sort of at the middle joint. It actually angles in slightly towards the other fingers. That's just our natural organic being, showing itself. But in CG, they're always straight. The way these things are modeled, they're never modeled with slight kinks in them. And just an interesting bit of trivia, when we were working on How to Train Your Dragon, the lead animator on Gobber, Fabio Lignini, said, this guy, he's a fighter, he's been in battles, numerous battles all the time, and he's old. So let's give him some gnarled hands. And so if you look at some of his shots, the digits are not straight on his one good hand that he actually does have. The digits are not straight. He's got a little kink in some of them as you go through the hand. So anyway, here's our positioned hand. I'm going to drop that down a little bit. We're going to drop this down a little bit too. So see, by dropping that arm a little bit, you feel more weight on that side. We might do something here too with the foot, where we might exaggerate this a little bit more. Let it angle out a little bit more, so we start getting a line through the body. Where's my Annotate Pro here? Wait a minute. What is all that stuff? Delete. So yeah, so if we look at what we're creating, if we try and think of a line of action that's going through the body, it's kind of like that. That's kind of what we're making. So we can exaggerate that even more if we know that's what we want. Hey, what did I do? It's not picking things now. All right, what's going on? What happened? Okay, nothing's working. Okay, it's back. I don't know what happened there. But see, so by moving that line a little bit, or moving that leg a little bit, I'm trying to see or feel this line that goes up through his torso and kind of into his head. Maybe by actually reducing this a little bit as far as the neck goes, and just leaving a little bit more tilt on the head. That might help it even more. By dipping your head down, you can get attitude. Okay, because if your character is looking, are these his eyes? Yeah. If your character is looking, oops, that is not the correct control. Here we go. If your character is looking out from under his brows, that's actually kind of a menacing pose when you really zoom in on him. If you find a character whose brows are slightly down and he's looking out from under them, it feels a little bit menacing. So you begin to add some attitude. So think about the way you're tilting your head. Is it giving you the attitude you want, or is it not? As far as this other arm goes, I don't know. What is he doing? Is he presenting to somebody? Nah. He should just be standing there. He's just been listening to somebody say something. So, one thing that I noticed with this is, my feet are perfectly in line with each other. That's something, again, thinking of this idea of adding twist to your character, to get a nice dynamic pose. If I scoot that leg back, and I add a little bit of rotation to it, now these legs are not in the same plane, and that immediately begins to add a little more interest. However, I don't know if I twisted my hips the right way. Actually, yeah, I did. Okay. So I can twist my hips a little bit more to make sure that they're aligned with the legs. Now, something else that you can do And it totally depends on the type of character you have, whether or not you would do this. But if he was showing himself to be especially buff, if you translated his body slightly forward and you really rotate his chest out and up, and you might need to use multiple controls to do this kind of thing. What I tend to do, I sort of rotate